A 15-year-old girl was shot dead in her own bedroom. Her father figure, gone too. And the woman responsible? She never even tried to leave. It was a quiet Saturday evening in a small neighborhood just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. The kind of evening where the streets are calm, kids are winding down, and families are thinking about dinner. Nobody expected that day, February 21st, 2026, to end the way it did. A group of relatives had been asked to meet at a house on Maple Street. A man named Robert Harris had called them earlier that afternoon and told them to come by around 5:30 in the evening. He said it like it was nothing unusual. Just family gathering, maybe. But when they pulled up to the house about 40 minutes late, the way families always are, they knocked on the door and nobody answered. They went inside, and what they found changed them forever. Robert Harris, a 63-year-old man, was found in the kitchen. He had been shot in the back of the head. And just down the hallway, in her own bedroom, they found her. A 15-year-old girl named Aaliyah Carter. She had been shot in the forehead. Both of them were gone. Just like that. On an ordinary Saturday. When the paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do. Both Robert and Aaliyah were pronounced dead right there in that house. The police were called. Yellow tape went up. Detectives arrived. A home that was supposed to be a place of safety became a crime scene. The authorities quickly identified this as a domestic double homicide. Two people, inside the same home, killed in what investigators believed was a deeply personal and intentional act. And as the night fell over Maple Street, neighbors stood outside in disbelief, unable to fully process what had just happened to people they had seen just days before. This was not supposed to happen here. But it did. Who they were. Before we go any further, I think it's important that we take a moment to remember who these two people actually were. Because in stories like this, the victims can sometimes become just names in a report. But they were so much more than that. Robert Harris was 63 years old. He was born and raised in the Atlanta area and had spent his entire adult life serving his community. He had worked for years as a firefighter, slowly climbing through the ranks until he became fire chief of his local department. Think about that, a man who spent his career running into burning buildings to save strangers. He later moved into city management, serving as a city administrator, and had also worked for a major aerospace company before he retired. He was the kind of man who showed up, not just at work, but in life. People who knew Robert said he was always at his daughter's basketball games. Always there, sitting in the stands cheering her on. And that daughter was Aaliyah. Aaliyah Carter was 15 years old. She was a sophomore in high school, a student who balanced her academics with her passion for basketball. She played on the junior varsity team at her school and had also competed in travel basketball leagues, the kind of dedicated young athlete who gave up weekends and evenings to improve her game. Coaches and teammates remembered her as someone who loved the sport. Truly loved it. She wasn't just filling a spot on the roster, she was building something. A future. A life full of possibility. She had games coming up. She had dreams. And then, without warning, everything stopped. When the community found out Aaliyah was gone, the basketball world around her grieved loudly and openly. Because that is how people grieve someone who is truly. As detectives worked through the night and into the following days, a clearer and more disturbing picture began to emerge. The scene inside the house told a story. Forensic investigators documented the positions of both victims, the angles of the gunshot wounds, and the physical state of the rooms. Aaliyah's bedroom showed signs of disturbance, suggesting there had been some kind of movement or struggle before she was shot. Robert was found in the kitchen, a detail that paints a grim picture of how sudden and close range this all was. Detectives collected shell casings, ran ballistic tests, and processed the entire property for physical evidence. They interviewed the family members who had discovered the bodies. They canvassed the neighborhood, speaking to anyone who may have seen or heard something that afternoon. Standard procedure in a homicide investigation, except nothing about this felt standard to the people involved. What the investigation revealed almost immediately was that this was not random. There was no sign of a break-in. No evidence of an outside intruder. This was something that happened between people who knew each other, inside a home that should have been safe. Within just a few hours of arriving on the scene, detectives had their suspect. She had not run. She had not hidden. In fact, she was still there when law enforcement arrived. A 61-year-old woman named Sandra Hayden was taken into custody that same evening. She was formally charged with first-degree murder and 2 counts of armed criminal action. She was booked into the county jail, and her bond was set at $2 million, cash only. The message from the court was clear. This was a serious, serious case. And they were not taking any chances. This is the part of the story that I keep coming back to. Because what Sandra Hayden said when police first made contact with her, before any interrogation, before any lawyer, before any of that, those words have stayed with me. She told the officers, without being asked, that she believed she was the villain in the story. She said Robert was a bad man and a narcissist. Those were her words. Unprompted. Spoken to law enforcement at the scene of a double homicide where she was the only living adult present. Now, I want to be careful here because this is still an ongoing case, and we don't have the full picture. We don't know everything that happened in that house. We don't know the full history between Sandra and Robert. We don't know what led to that moment. The investigation is still unfolding. The courts will determine what happens next. But those words she said, they tell us something. They tell us that whatever happened in that house, Sandra believed she had reasons. Whether those reasons justify anything is a question for the legal system to answer. What we know is that 2 people are dead. A grandfather-aged man who spent his life serving others, and a 15-year-old girl who never got the chance to live hers fully. Sandra's case is now in the hands of the courts. A preliminary hearing was scheduled, though no trial date had been announced at the time of the story. Defense attorneys and prosecutors were both preparing. The legal process, slow as it always is, was beginning to move. And somewhere in that process, we hope the full truth will eventually come out. In the days and weeks that followed, the community around Maple Street tried to find ways to hold itself together. Aaliyah's school issued a public statement expressing the deep pain that her loss had caused among students and staff. Counselors were made available for anyone who needed to talk. And in the gymnasiums and community centers where she had played the game she loved, people came together to remember her. There were balloon releases. There were memorial layup drills, players shooting free throws in her honor. There were ribbons and posters with her face on them, smiling back at the people who missed her. And Robert, a man who had dedicated decades of his life to protecting others, was mourned by colleagues, by people in the fire service who had known him for years, and by the community he had served with quiet commitment. As of the time this story was reported, the case remained open and active. Investigators had not yet publicly confirmed the exact motive beyond Sandra's own comments at the scene. No prior police calls to the residents had been made public. The full forensic report had not been released. There were still more questions than answers. But here is what I believe. I believe that stories like this one deserve to be told carefully. Not for shock, not for clicks, but because Robert Harris and Aaliyah Carter were real people. They had people who loved them. They had routines and habits and favorite things. And they deserved to live. Whatever happened inside that house on Maple Street, whatever truth the courts eventually reveal, I hope that the people who loved Robert and Aaliyah find some peace. And I hope that somewhere in telling this story, we all carry a little more awareness of just how quickly and quietly the unthinkable can happen. Rest in peace, Robert. Rest in peace, Aaliyah. Thanks for your watching. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to the True Crime Cinema for meaningful stories that inspire and teach life lessons.